So a brand new feature to FPL this season is allowing us now 2 of each chip, 1 of each to be used in each half of the season. And the big talk of the town right now is whether you should use that bench boost early or should you save it for a later game week. And today we're going to take a look at everything that you need to know for the bench boost and some of the best possible weeks that you can use it, so you can make the best decision for yourself and your team, so you basically get the most points out of it. We are only 1 week away from the start of the season as well, and Fantasy Football Hub is still offering their pre-season 50% off, so if you do plan on using the best possible stats to give yourself the best chance this season in FPL, make sure to use the link in the description and you can get 50% off. But without further ado, let's take a look at why you would want to be using the bench boost early on in the season. It is one of those chips that a lot of people don't really like. You plan a lot for it, and a lot of the time you don't really get too much back. You are really just looking for about 10 to 20 points, which in the grand scheme of things isn't really that much for a chip that you do, put a lot of emphasis on. So a lot of people would use it early to get it out of the way. You don't have to worry about planning for it in the middle of the season. It's not going to hinder your squad later on trying to plan. Sometimes you can take 3-4 game weeks planning your transfers for your bench boost coming up. At least if you get it out of the way early, then that's it, totally gone. It's been used and you don't have to worry and hinder your team, around that bench boost in the weeks around it. If you do want to start with an expensive bench boost as well in game week 1 or maybe game week 2, you can then use your transfers later on to remove that budget from the bench. You can start maybe with a 5.5 defender on the bench. You can maybe make a transfer in game week 3 or 4 and bring in a 4.5 million defender, and that way you're getting like the most choice. You're not forced into any transfers or anything like that, and you are kind of just having a clear structure of what you want to do with your team. And of course you do get the unlimited transfers to select your perfect 15 transfers for game week 1 if game week 1 is when you choose to bench boost. However, there is quite a lot of reasons not to bench boost very early as well. It is of course harder to predict the lineups in game week 1. We are specifically looking at game week 1 here. It's a brand new season. There's new teams in the league, new signings. It's very difficult in game week 1 to predict who is going to start. A lot of people last year get done by the likes of Kwanzaa and Kunku, players who were predicted to start very popular in teams in game week 1 and then really didn't hit the ground at all, and it was very early transfers out. So if you're going to be using a chip which only allows 4 of your players on the bench to get points and then 1 or 2 of them doesn't start, you are really wasting that chip at that point. As of course the lowest team value of the season as well. Everyone starts at 100 million. If you were to wait till maybe game week 16 or something like that, you are probably going to be around the 102, 103 million mark and have an extra couple of million to play with your team. And obviously with 15 players, instead of just focus on your starting 11, the highest team value possible is always going to be more beneficial. Of course, using the bench boost can lead to early transfers and early wildcards. Like I said, you can start to reduce your budget if you do start with an expensive bench, but that is going to be using transfers. People that don't use the bench boost are going to be banking transfers and could possibly benefit more later on than yourself, who could still be making transfers because of that game week 1 bench boost, and again can lead to early wild cards, maybe a game week 3, game week 2 wild card to take all that budget back out your bench and focus on that starting 11. So just a couple of tips if you are going to be looking to use that bench boost early. Don't get caught up on just the bench boost. If you're going to be using your bench boost in game week 1, do not, neglect game week 2, game week 3, game week 4. Make sure your team is absolutely solid, and as you can see, keep the bench value as low as possible. You obviously want to be picking 15 nailed players, so trying to get, a full bench of nailed players at a cheap cost is going to be pretty difficult, but you want to keep the bench value as low as possible, because if you are going to go for an expensive bench, you are going to be hindering yourself in future game weeks. So we've got a couple of players on screen here that do look like they are going to be good value starters and could really make do for a really nice bench boost. And they are pretty popular players as well. A lot of people have gone for these players. The likes of Dubravka looks like he's going to be nailed as a 4 million goalkeeper for a bench boost. That is exactly what you are going to be looking for. Esteve, Xhaka, I don't know how you say his name, is it Gui? I really have no idea, but a lot of good cheap options available. They're the teams, they're the players that you want to be targeting if you are going to be using a bench boost and making sure you have the best possible team for the weeks after that bench boost as well. Now, obviously, we were just talking about cheap bench players. Well, here is a ton more. This year, there is a lot of players that are looking like very good value, very cheap, which means the bench boost early on is actually looking like a pretty decent option. You've got loads of options on screen, and there is loads more options as well that aren't here on this list. But you've got 4 million defenders, 4.5 million defenders. Obviously, the introduction of defensive contributions really does help the 4 million and 4.5 million defenders. You've got cheap midfielders in there as well, 5 million and 5.5 million, again with potential attacking returns and defensive contribution points as well. And of course some 4 million goalkeepers in there as well. Some nailed, some not so nailed, but you do have a huge option of players that you can potentially go for, and it's really just looking to try and nail down those fixtures so that you have the perfect bench boost with a very low cost team. So you'll notice, a lot of the same teams. Obviously, a lot of the lower teams, lower league teams have the cheaper players available. So what we've got on screen is the fixtures from game week 1 to 9 of a lot of the players you will, or of a lot of the teams that you will see players from on a lot of people's benches. Now we've got the likes of Sunderland, Burnley, two very popular teams for bench players. If you are watching this, you probably have at least one Burnley or Sunderland player on your bench right now. You've also got Wolves, West Ham, Palace, again teams that have 4.5 million defenders, 5.5 million midfielders, stuff like that. The same with Nottingham Forest, Aston Villa, Spurs, Bournemouth, Fulham and Everton. So you can see all of their fixtures from game week 1 to 9, but what we want to do is kind of nail down where the best game weeks are for home fixtures, green fixtures, and just the best opportunities to potentially use that bench boost. Now the first one we're going to look at is game week 1. As you can see, we've got 4 green fixtures available here if you are looking to use that game week 1 bench boost. Sunderland is looking like a very nice value team. Now I've popped a couple of drafts that you could potentially use on screen as well, with Sunderland players in there, with West Ham players, Spurs and Everton as well. Again, these are just rough drafts. You can obviously mix and match these as much as you would like. We've got the likes of Kinski in goal, of course. He is not 100% nailed at the minute, so again that is your big disadvantage of bench boosting in game week 1. If you do go for Kinski against Burnley, there's a high chance that Vicario does start in goals, so that's why I'm not the biggest fan of a game week 1 bench boost. But the same with Darlow. I'm aware that Perry has signed and he's the 4.5 million goalkeeper for Leeds, but again, it's going to be pretty tough to try and figure that one out. The problem with the game week 1 bench boost as well is the 4 million goalkeeper that is nailed in Dubravka is playing against Tottenham away from home. So a very tough fixture there, which means you probably will have to go for rotating goalkeepers, potentially picking 2 4.5s, which I don't really like myself, but you do still have a lot of good options. West Ham have Sunderland away. If you've got Jared Bowen in your starting 11, you could go for maybe Diouf on the bench. Van de Ven, another really popular pick against Burnley at home, and really nice bench player. Everton have a couple as well. I think you probably would have a lot of the Everton players in your starting 11 anyway. Tarkowski's a bit more expensive and Dye the same. You probably wouldn't have them on your bench anyway, so I don't really think you really have to worry too much about them. You do have Dewsbury Hall at 5 million, who could be another potential option as well. But like I said, still a lot of options for a game week 1 bench boost. It's not my favourite because I think there does come with a lot of disadvantages, but you definitely can get away with a very cheap and respectable bench boost in game week 1. Now game week 2 looks a lot more appealing to me for a bench boost than game week 1 does, mainly because you can have game week 1 to see who's actually going to play, and if you're your current bench isn't looking like they are going to be starting, then you don't have to use the bench boost. You can wait a couple of weeks and you're not going to be forced into anything. But there is a lot more better fixtures, I think, in game week 2 than there was in game week 1. Now, as you can see at the top, Sunderland and Burnley, the two teams with the cheapest players in the game, are playing against each other. And as you can see, the top draft on the right hand side is only 17.5 million. It does have 2 Burnley and 2 Sunderland players, so it's not the strongest bench in the world. Again, like I said, you do want to focus on game weeks around the bench boost. You don't want to purely put all of your attention on the bench boost week. So if you do have a weak bench, it could hinder you a little bit more in future game weeks. But I do think these players are looking pretty nailed. Dubravka is easily the best backup goalkeeper in my opinion in the game. Esteve is going to play for Burnley. Xhaka could be a really nice option as well. Xhaka and Esteve, two options that can pick up defensive contributions. And of course you've got Gueye in there at 4.5 million, who is going to be in a lot of teams as well. And again, you can wait obviously till game week 2 to see if Gueye is going to be the starting striker for Sunderland. And if he's not, then you can either make a transfer, I wouldn't recommend it, or you can obviously just wait and hold off on using that bench boost. But you are looking at one of the cheapest possible benches in the game with that top bench at 17.5 million. The cheapest you can get is 17 million. Xhaka is the one who is a little bit more at 5 instead of the minimum 4.5, but very nice if you want to put a lot of attention on your starting 11. You can free up a lot of budget on that bench and still be able to use your bench boost. I do think it will be pretty low scoring though, because you are looking at Xhaka and Gueye, who you're going to be hoping for attacking returns, and you're going to have 2 Burnley defenders where you're going to be hoping for a clean sheet. So it does kind of counteract each other, but if you're not really too bothered about using your bench boost, it's still a really nice fixture for both teams to potentially pick up 7 to 10 points if that is what you are going to be aiming for. If the Burnley and Sunderland players aren't really what you're looking for, there is still plenty of decent fixtures. Bournemouth have Wolves at home. Again, another team that's been massively underrated because of their game week 1 fixture. You could potentially look at like a Ryan Christie, who's fantastic for defensive contributions, or maybe some of the attackers like Semenyo and stuff like that as well. Nottingham Forest and Crystal Palace are playing against each other, 2 orange fixtures on the fixture ticker. Again, 2 teams that have really good players on either side, really good cheap players in there as well. Aston Villa have Brentford, a team heavily weakened by losing their losing a lot of their key players. So Konza could be really nice as a potential bench boost player there as well. And then you've got like the Wolves as well. The likes of Strand Larsen can come into play, Arias if you want to go there as well. So you don't really have to go for Burnley and Sunderland in game week 2. It is personally what I would do. Maybe you could upgrade, one player in there if you don't want to go for Gueye. Maybe go for someone else. But I definitely think Burnley and Sunderland is going to be the way to go because of how cheap they are, and they are pretty much nailed in their teams as well. But there is plenty of options as well for a game week 2 bench boost, and I think it does come with a lot of positives as well. Now, another one I really like the look of is the game week 4 bench boost. Now, this isn't necessarily for those who want to be going for as cheap as possible. As you can see, Sunderland and Burnley don't have the best fixtures available. Away from home for Sunderland against Palace and at home to Liverpool. You really don't want any Burnley players for that. But other than that, a lot of your 4.5 million defenders have some pretty decent fixtures here. Palace are playing against Sunderland at home. You've got the likes of Chris Richards, maybe Lacroix. If you want Palace defenders, really, really nice fixture for them. Fulham are playing against Leeds at home. Again, another team who have some players who are really good for ball recoveries, defensive contributions. Anthony Robinson, Joachim Anderson is really good as well. So again, a lot of really good options available. Outside of that, there's still some pretty decent ones. Spurs do play against West Ham away from home. Maybe Van de Ven in there, maybe like a Pape Sarr, who does seem to be climbing up in the ownership a little bit ever since Maddison's injury. He's been playing in the 10. and he's only 5 million as well, so another decent option that you could potentially go for. Villa, of course, have Everton, again another shout for the likes of Konza, but there's a lot of good options, in the 4.5 million range if you want to kind of hold a strongish bench, and play around that with rotating defenders. There is options for you there in game week 4. It's not my favourite because I do like I like having a cheap bench, so Burnley and Sunderland, I definitely would have some of those guys in there. But if you do want to go a little bit more expensive, have a little bit more of a stronger bench boost, game week 4 is definitely an option for you. And then finally, we're going to take a look at Game Week 8. Now, of course, you can obviously go back to when all the colours were on screen and have a look yourself if you want to maybe look at Game Week 3, 5, 6, 7 and 9. But these are just the ones that I've found to be the most useful for what I want out of a bench boost. And Game Week 8 looks pretty strong as well. Again, Sunderland and Burnley, both with favourable fixtures and both at home as well. So if you're going to be picking Dubravka, if you're going to be picking Esteve, if you're going to be picking Gueye, if you're going to be picking Xhaka, Adingra, these are the fixtures you want to be looking at, and Game Week 8 looks very, very solid in there as well. Wolves at home for Sunderland, Leeds at home for Burnley, so perfect for Dubravka if you want that 4 million backup goalkeeper. But you've also got good fixtures from other teams as well. Wolves have Sunderland, again they are going to be playing each other, but you've also got West Ham against Brentford at home, obviously Diouf and Wan-Bissaka, 2 defenders, again up against a weakened Brentford attack. And then potentially Palace as well. At this point, you probably will have transferred in some Palace players because they do have a good run of fixtures: Sunderland, West Ham, Everton. So you're probably going to have Palace players in here anyway. Richards, Eze, Lacroix in there, maybe Munoz as well. So Palace is probably going to be available for you. And I think it does open, it's not early in the season, but I think it does give you a lot more relaxation in Game Week 8 because you have home fixtures and good fixtures for your cheaper players that you can wait and see 8 game weeks to see if they are going to be useful enough or not. This is definitely one of my favourite picks as well because you don't have to worry in Game Week 1 about picking a solid bench. You can just pick the cheap guys, and if they do end up doing well, then Game Week 8 comes around and you've got 2 really nice fixtures for them. You're not zooming right into things, having to pick a bench boost early in the game, and you don't have to worry about it by the time Game Week 8 comes around either because you've got cheap players on your bench that do have good fixtures all at the same time. So Game Week 8 is definitely one of my favourites as well. It feels like a natural time to potentially use the bench boost with the season kind of having settled in a little bit, and you kind of know who is going to be good and who's not going to be good. So it gives you the cheap options available, and of course by that time we'll know who, which teams are actually looking decent and which teams don't look so decent. So I quite like Game Week 8 if you're not really if you don't want to plan so early to bench boost. Game Week 8 looks pretty solid, and it's not really the aggressive strategy either, which I know suits a lot of people as well. But with all that being said, these are my final verdicts on screen of each week 2 bench boost. Of course, you can take, this is just my opinion, you can obviously just take whatever you like from this. The 4 players on screen for each week is the 4 players that I would pick right now for a bench boost. That would probably change by the time the likes of Game Week 8 comes around. But as of right now, and planning, that's kind of where I'm at. So for Game Week 1, obviously you're getting it over with. You can see the good fixtures now, but it's going to be expensive to pick a decent team. Burnley and Sunderland Sunderland have a decent fixture, but Burnley don't have the best fixture. So you are going to be picking, rotating goalkeepers. Obviously going to be harder to predict the lineups in Game Week 1, so it's really not my favourite week to be using that. Game Week 2, however, looks very, very decent to use that bench boost. And you know who's going to be likely to play because you've seen Game Week 1. You've got a 4 million goalkeeper in Dubravka with a nice fixture against Sunderland. The same with a 4 million defender with Esteve. Again, great fixtures all round. The bench in itself only costs 18 million. Again, the minimum you can get for a bench is 17 million. So it's not going to, affect your starting 11 in any way, which is of course really nice, but it is likely going to be a low scoring bench boost. If Sunderland score against Burnley, it's going to be, pretty disappointing unless Anderson, if you do pick him, goes and gets a double-digit haul. But if you do get that clean sheet with Burnley against Sunderland, it's obviously going to be a fantastic game week. But game week 2 does look really, really solid for a bench boost. Game week 4, it depends kind of what you want to go for. Again, game week 4 is a very expensive bench. You're going to be transferring in Palace players at this point. Lacroix and Richards against Sunderland at home. They do have really nice fixtures all round as well. You're looking at home fixtures all round. Anderson with Leeds at home, Petrovic with Brighton at home. It is going to be another case of rotating goalkeepers because Dubravka has Liverpool at home, which isn't really ideal. And in the, again, trying to focus on game weeks around the bench boost, Richards and Anderson don't really rotate too well. You will see that if you have a look at the fixture ticker, but obviously great fixtures together in game week 4. But if you're trying to rotate 4.5 million defenders, they kind of have good fixtures at the same time and bad fixtures at the same time. So you're going to have to kind of add them in with other 4.5 million defenders if that is kind of the strategy that you do want to go for. Game week 8 is probably my favourite time to use the bench boost. I'm not fully locked in on it myself, but I think the fact that it's so adjustable is so great. You can start with a cheap bench, Dubravka, Esteve, as most people are, and then by the time game week 8 comes around, you can use that bench boost if you want. You'll see at that point if Gui is a starting player for Sunderland. If he is, fantastic. If he isn't, you're going to have plenty of transfers available to transfer him out. And Arias, you don't even need to start with Arias. Again, he's someone who could be on penalties and could do well. Again, we don't know if he's going to fit into the league really well, but a really nice fixture for him in game week 8. And if he does take penalties for Wolves, and if he does get off to a flying start, you can just transfer him in, and life's going to be good. You're going to have a fantastic looking bench boost in game week 8. So I think that is my favourite at this moment in time. The only problem is, of course, if any of these guys end up getting injured in the build up to game week 8, which you obviously can't predict, but you have to definitely consider as well. But that is going to be it for our video today. If you did enjoy, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe. Again, Fantasy Football Hub are doing 50% off only until the start of the season. So make sure if you are going to be signing up this season to use the link in the description. I will have a huge new series coming out next week for Game Week 1. So make sure you subscribe and turn the notification bell on for that. It's going to be fantastic. It's going to be brilliant. And it's going to cover everything you need to know for every single game week coming up. So once again, thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video.